At the start of the new year, shocking news came from Nepal. A plane carrying 72 people had crashed. Authorities have now confirmed 68 fatalities. Is there any hope of finding someone who miraculously survived? To many, that hope seems incredibly slim. In the history of global aviation, surviving major air crashes like this one is exceedingly rare, yet there was once a girl who fell from nearly 10,000 meters and lived. Even more incredible, she journeyed through the dangerous Amazon rainforest and escaped death, becoming the sole survivor of a historic aviation tragedy. So how did this girl endure such a life-or-death journey and survive 10 days alone in the Amazon jungle? Today, let's talk about a story so extraordinary, even novels wouldn't dare to write it. Juliane Kupke's story. Hello, everyone. Let's rewind time to December 24th, 1971. Just one day before Christmas, at Travel's International Airport in Lima, the capital of Peru, a country in South America, was entering the peak travel season for the holidays. At the airport, domestic flights were fully booked. With Christmas just one day away, everyone was eager to board their flights and return home to celebrate with family. However, the weather didn't cooperate on this particular day. The sky was overcast, heavy with clouds, causing many flights to be delayed or canceled. Hopes of making it home were growing dim. Many people appeared frustrated and disappointed. Suddenly, cheers erupted from a group of passengers gathered at one check-in counter. What had happened? They had just learned that Flight 508, the one they were waiting for, was scheduled to depart on time. 508 was the flight number of a plane operated by LANSA, the national airline of Peru. Flight 508 used a civilian aircraft called the Lockheed L-188A Electra, manufactured by the renowned Lockheed Company. This factory was famous for producing military aircraft for scan work, earning a strong reputation worldwide. However, Lockheed's venture into the commercial airline industry wasn't as successful. The wing design of the L-188A model had notable flaws. As early as 1959, the very year the aircraft debuted in the United States, 3 serious air disasters involving this model occurred within just 1 year, leading to numerous fatalities. This aircraft model was immediately phased out of the U.S. market, but strangely enough, in South America, it continued operating without any major safety issues. The Lockheed L-188 aircraft for Flight 508 was about to take off from Lima, fly over the Andes Mountains, and finally land in the city of Pucallpa, Iquitos. Throughout the entire flight, the plane would soar above the vast Amazon rainforest, a sprawling expanse with no possible emergency landing sites. At this time, the pre-flight checks had been completed, and the plane was waiting to board its remaining passengers. Among them were a mother and daughter, both excited and eager. The mother was Maria Kupke, and her 17-year-old daughter was Juliane Kupke, the main character in today's incredible survival story. Originally, on the previous day, Maria and her daughter had planned to fly home to reunite with her husband, Hans Wilhelm Kupke. However, due to bad weather, that flight was canceled. Maria had gone through considerable trouble to get 2 seats on Flight 508. If you found this video interesting, don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you won't miss the next exciting adventures. Ironically, those 2 tickets had caused an argument between her and her husband. Hans Wilhelm had repeatedly warned her not to buy tickets from Peru's national airline, LANSA. The reason was simple. LANSA had a notoriously poor reputation. Back in 1966, there had already been a plane crash that killed 49 people. By 1970, another major accident occurred, claiming the lives of 100 passengers. In just 5 short years, 2 major aviation disasters had happened, enough to make anyone shudder at the thought. But Maria had no other choice. Plane tickets right before Christmas were hard to come by. After much effort, she finally secured 2 seats on a Lanza flight. She thought to herself, "It can't be that unlucky. Surely getting on a national airline flight won't lead to an accident." Yet, tragically, that's exactly what happened. That afternoon, Flight 508 departed on schedule. Juliane and her mother were seated in row 3. Juliane sat by the window, her mother in the middle, and next to her was a large man seated on the aisle. Outside the window, the sky was clear, and the majestic Andes Mountains stretched below them. The man beside them was already fast asleep, and Maria had dozed off as well. Only Juliane remained fully awake, her eyes wide open, lost in thoughts about her recent high school graduation ceremony. About 20 minutes into the flight, the plane passed over the Andes and entered the skies above the Amazon rainforest. It was at this moment that a deep rumble, like thunder, began to echo outside the window. A flash of lightning sliced through Juliane's sweet thoughts. The plane had just entered a thunderstorm. A sudden, violent storm had swept in. At this moment, Maria was fully awake. She looked out the window with a tense expression, perhaps recalling her husband's warning. "Never buy tickets from this airline." She gripped her daughter's hand tightly. Despite the fear, Juliane remained curious, watching the scene outside. The sky was pitch black, and bolts of lightning slashed across the darkness, illuminating layers of thick clouds. Seeing the ominous sky, Juliane began to feel uneasy. Suddenly, the plane began to shake violently as it hit turbulence. The overhead luggage compartments burst open, and items rained down chaotically. One Christmas gift box even struck Juliane. In that very moment, a blinding flash erupted outside the window. Juliane was startled to see a blazing ball of light falling straight toward the wing. Instantly, the wing snapped off. At that point, the blood in her body seemed to freeze. Then out of nowhere, she saw a glowing figure, like an angel, soaring toward her. Before she could process what was happening, she immediately felt everything spinning, sky and earth flipping violently. Screams, along with the roar of the plane's engines, echoed loudly in her ears. Inside the cabin, suitcases and packages flew in every direction. The plane had started to break apart, falling from an altitude of around 8,000 meters. When it descended to about 4,500 meters, the fuselage tore open completely, and fresh air rushed in. Juliane, who had been in a semi-conscious state, was jolted awake by the impact. At that moment, her seatbelt was tightly gripping her body, making it hard to breathe. But what terrified her most was a chilling realization. There was no floor beneath her feet. She was falling at incredible speed, nothing supporting her. The lush green Amazon rainforest was rapidly approaching. Juliane screamed helplessly and then passed out once again. Debris from the aircraft scattered across the forest within a 15-kilometer radius. It's unclear how much time had passed before Juliane slowly regained a flicker of consciousness. She felt like a breeze, floating aimlessly inside a vast, pitch-dark space. Her body felt heavy, filthy, and drenched. Just then, a faint sound reached her ears. As she opened her eyes, she realized she could clean off the mud covering her body. Slowly, Juliane opened her eyes. Juliane was lying sprawled on the damp ground. It seemed like it had just rained. Something was pressing lightly on her body. In a daze, she reached out to feel what it was. It turned out to be a row of 3 airplane seats flipped upside down. At that moment, Juliane suddenly snapped back to awareness. Oh no! The plane I was on. It crashed. It fell into the Amazon rainforest. One thought rang loudly in her mind. Where's Mom? Where is she?" Panic surged within Juliane. She tried to sit up to look for her mother, but the moment she moved, she felt dizzy and nauseous. That's when Juliane realized she had suffered a head injury, and one of her eyes could barely see due to severe swelling. She groped around the three-seat row, hoping to find her mother or the large man who had been sitting next to them, but no one was there. Both had vanished. A chill ran down Juliane's spine as her heart pounded with fear. She forced herself to calm down, slowly sat up, and checked her own condition. To her surprise, Juliane discovered that her right collarbone was broken. Her calf had a long wound, though it wasn't bleeding. Apart from that, most of her body appeared largely intact, with only some scratches here and there. Considering she had just fallen from thousands of meters in the sky, it truly felt like a miracle. Juliane, using her one good eye, carefully observed and saw that the back of the seat was tangled with broken branches. She realized that the seat must have landed in the treetops, and that's what saved her life. But Juliane had no time to rejoice. The only thought on her mind now was to find her mother. Juliane was slightly nearsighted, and her glasses had long been lost. Looking around, she spotted some airplane debris not far from her. She staggered toward the wreckage, searching frantically. Unfortunately, she found no sign of her mother, or anyone else. At that moment, Juliane felt utterly hopeless, as if the world had abandoned her. She collapsed onto the ground in despair. Her thoughts turned to her father. Juliane's father was a German who, after World War II, intended to flee to the United States. Somehow, he ended up in Peru instead and became a zoologist. Later, he married Maria, a researcher specializing in birds. The two established a simple ecological research station deep in the Amazon jungle, where they studied wildlife and birds. She treated the toucan like a pet and was completely familiar with jaguars, venomous spiders, and poisonous snakes in the jungle. She could move freely through the rainforest, just like a native tribesperson. Juliane was now filled with despair, feeling that there was no way out. She lay in the rubble for a day and a night. Then she began to feel hungry and realized that, if she did not regain her spirit, she would be buried in the Amazon jungle forever. Juliane tried to regain her spirit, looking for usable household items in the wreckage of the plane. Luckily, she found a bag of candy and a piece of spoiled cake. The cake had to be thrown away, but the bag of candy became her only food for the following days. And so Juliane began her journey to escape the Amazon rainforest. It was December, the rainy season. The climate was mild, the average temperature was around 20 degrees Celsius. At night, it dropped to around 15 degrees Celsius. Thanks to that, even though she was only wearing a thin, short dress and sandals, Juliane was still not cold enough to freeze. The jungle is the environment that Juliane grew up in, and she is not unfamiliar with it. However, how to find the right direction, that is the most difficult thing. If you find this video interesting, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next exciting journeys. At that moment, Juliane recalled her father's words. If you ever get lost in the jungle, the first thing you must do is find a source of water. A stream leads to a small river leads to a large one, and eventually, you'll get out. Without wasting another moment, Juliane began searching for signs of a stream. Meanwhile, news of the Lanza Flight 508 crash had spread across Peru. Rescue teams had already launched a careful search around the crash site. But while they were combing through the jungle, Juliane, exhausted and injured, was still dragging herself through the forest, searching for a way out. Her pace was slow, her body broken. On the fourth day after the crash, Juliane stumbled upon an open clearing, and there, she saw the most horrifying sight of her life. In front of her was a row of airplane seats, half buried in the ground. Still strapped in one of the seats was a female passenger's corpse. Her body looked like it had been shot into the earth like a bullet. Juliane bit her lip and gathered all her courage to move closer. As she looked more closely, she saw that the woman had painted toenails. At that moment, Juliane sighed in relief and dropped to the ground. Thank goodness, it's not my mom, because her mother never painted her nails. At this point, Juliane had gone through extreme mental stress, and her body was completely exhausted. The moment she sat down on the ground, she couldn't move anymore. She didn't know how long she sat there when suddenly she heard a sound she had been hoping for, a sound she had longed for. It grew louder and louder. As if someone had injected her with a surge of energy, Juliane forced herself to stand up and followed the direction of the sound. At last, she saw a flowing source of water. It was a small stream. Now, after 4 days of stumbling through the jungle, Juliane finally felt a spark of hope. She knew that she had a chance to survive. She continued her journey, stopping and going, following the little stream. Eventually, she reached a small river, but her heart sank. Why? Because the riverbank was filled with wild sugarcane. Juliane, who had grown up in the Amazon jungle, knew this plant well. Wild sugarcane only grows in places where humans rarely tread. If it grows here, it means no one ever comes this way. I may never be found. As she sat there in despair, Juliane heard another sound, this time from the sky. She looked up and saw a helicopter circling above, as if searching for survivors. Juliane screamed with all her might, but the people on the helicopter couldn't hear her. Moments later, the helicopter flew far away. She stood frozen, staring up at the sky, her heart nearly consumed by despair. She no longer knew where her way out might be. In that moment, only one thought rose in her mind, the prayer her mother had once taught her. Dear gods, please grant me safe passage out of this place. One day I promise I will repay this land. She had no idea how long she had been praying, when suddenly a strange sound reached her ears, an echo coming from deep within the jungle. Kulu! Kulu! Juliane snapped to attention. That sound came from a bird known as the Hotsin Opisthocomus hosin. Her mother, an ornithologist, had once told her, Hotsins usually live in flocks near large rivers. That could only mean one thing. A big river was nearby. Juliane immediately regained her spirit and began following the bird's call, and sure enough, a wide stream appeared before her eyes. Yet even then, a smile could not form on Juliane's face, for this moment was still far from one of celebration. Juliane had no idea how much farther she would have to walk before encountering another human being. But most importantly, the river ahead was filled with danger. There were crocodiles, flesh-eating fish, and other terrifying creatures that most people only ever see in horror films. But here, in the deep waters of the Amazon, they were real and everywhere. Worse still, there was another more dangerous creature lurking along the riverbanks, the freshwater stingray. These flat-bodied fish live buried under the mud and sand, making them nearly invisible. They don't usually attack, but if someone accidentally steps on their tail, the result can be serious. Their tails have venomous barbs. A sting can cause intense pain at best and death at worst. Juliane walked along the riverbank, following the flow of water. She picked up a long stick, using it to prod the sand ahead of her with each step, hoping to scare away any hidden stingrays. She kept going, slowly, carefully, and constantly alert. She even saw 2 or 3 crocodiles near the shore. But luckily, these little monsters had no interest in attacking her. In fact, upon seeing her, they turned and swam away. Perhaps they had never seen a human before, deep in this untouched part of the Amazon. When they spotted Juliane, they panicked and disappeared into the river's center. At this point, it had been 5 days since the plane crash. Juliane was growing weaker by the day. Her only food was a bag of candy. Fortunately, water was everywhere. Strangely, Juliane didn't feel very hungry, but she could tell her strength was fading more and more. There were moments when she couldn't even lift her legs. She also noticed the wound on her arm was not only red and swollen, but inside it were tiny white things. Looking closely, she realized they were maggots. The flies that filled the rainforest must have laid eggs in her fresh wound without her even knowing. This meant that if Juliane didn't get out of the jungle soon, she would die from infection. Her strategy was to climb onto a floating tree trunk and drift along the river. That way, she could save her energy and also avoid getting lost. By drifting downstream, she hoped to reach larger rivers or inhabited areas, which might mean someone was living nearby. At night, Juliane would climb ashore to sleep, and so day after day passed. In the blink of an eye, it was already the 10th day since the crash. Juliane was now completely exhausted. She barely managed to pull herself off the log drifting down the river and crawl onto the shore. But she couldn't move her legs anymore. Her vision went dark, and she collapsed on the sandy riverbank. Just before falling unconscious, Juliane faintly saw a small boat on the shore. Weak and dazed, she thought it was just another hallucination. During her 10-day ordeal, such visions had become more and more frequent. But when she opened her eyes again, she saw the boat was still there. At that moment, she knew this time it wasn't a hallucination. She was really saved. She looked around more carefully and discovered a run-down wooden hut just a few dozen meters from the riverbank. And yet it took Juliane several hours of crawling and struggling to reach the hut, where she collapsed and lost consciousness. The next day, a group of indigenous people came to the hut. When they saw a small girl covered in injuries, they were completely stunned. Where did this child come from? At that moment, Juliane regained consciousness briefly and began, in broken sentences, to describe what had happened to her. The woodcutters couldn't believe their ears. Even a novel wouldn't dare tell such a story. Falling from nearly 10,000 meters and surviving, then trekking alone for 10 days through the jungle. This girl was truly a living miracle. The three traders had already heard about the crash of the Peruvian national airline on the radio. They quickly used gasoline to clean the maggots from Juliane's wounds, a method commonly used by those accustomed to wild, remote living. After 10 days lost in the Amazon jungle, Juliane was finally rescued. The three men then took the unconscious girl to the nearest hospital. When she woke up, Juliane saw her father sitting at her bedside. The two of them embraced, crying quietly, unable to say a word. Later, Juliane learned the truth. On the same day the crash occurred, a total of 14 passengers had initially survived, including her mother. But tragically, all 14 of them succumbed to their injuries before rescue teams could reach them. Thus, Juliane was the sole survivor of the catastrophe. If you found this video interesting, don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you won't miss the next exciting adventures. The investigation revealed that the plane crash was largely caused by human error. First, the pre-flight safety inspection for Flight 508 was substandard. Several parts on the plane's wing had been temporarily patched together, failing to meet proper technical standards. Additionally, the pilot, eager to stay on schedule, deliberately flew into a storm system. Later, in an attempt to avoid the storm, the aircraft was forced to climb to an altitude of over 8,000 meters. However, due to a lack of sufficient flying skill, the plane failed to escape a lightning strike, which hit the wing and caused it to break apart. Following this catastrophic event, Lanza Airlines was permanently shut down. The world was stunned upon hearing about Juliane, a 17-year-old girl who fell from nearly 10,000 meters and survived. She endured 10 days of relentless struggle and bravery, navigating the deadly Amazon rainforest on her own. It was truly a miraculous and inspirational story. Where else could one find such a powerful human tale? Countless journalists wanted to reach her. Everyone was eager to cover the story of her incredible resilience. But Juliane didn't want to meet anyone. This was the most painful memory of her life. Her beloved mother was gone, everyone on that flight had died, and she was the only one who survived. The depth of that pain was something no one else could understand. When it came to anything related to the tragedy, Juliane didn't want to revisit it. She even tried to distance herself from her father, because he too was part of that memory. As time went on, Juliane grew older. Slowly, she began to step out of the shadow of her trauma. She also kept the promise she made to herself after the accident, to become a biologist, to study, and to protect the wildlife of the Amazon rainforest. From that point, she began accepting interviews and started sharing her story. Juliane's experience was eventually turned into a documentary. Speaking of that documentary, Wings of Hope, there was an even more magical twist of fate behind it. The director of the film, Werner Herzog, was also a German, a world-famous filmmaker. Years earlier, he had actually purchased 2 tickets for Lanza Flight 508. However, because of the airline's poor reputation, after hesitating for a while, he decided to return the tickets 2 days before the flight. As it turned out, those very same tickets were later purchased by Juliane and her mother, setting them on a path toward the unimaginable. After the accident, Herzog felt lucky for himself, but also deeply saddened for Juliane and her mother. He reached out to Juliane, shared the incredible twist of fate between them, and invited her to participate in making the documentary. Initially, Juliane had refused all interview requests from the media, but inspired by this strange coincidence, she agreed. The film crew returned to the Amazon rainforest and retraced the terrifying journey Juliane had made years earlier. They even found the same 3-seat row that had helped save her. It was still there. Herzog speculated that a sudden gust of wind had slowed her fall and that the seat had caught in the treetop above. Then, layer after layer of leaves and branches below continued to break her fall. Thanks to that, Juliane miraculously survived, even though she fell from nearly 10,000 meters. Yet that plane crash remained a lingering pain in Juliane's life. Ever since the event, she constantly asked herself one question. In that moment before the crash, that glowing light she saw, could it have been her guardian angel? No one really knows. So what do you think after hearing this story? Is there any rational explanation for Juliane's astonishing survival? The seat, the tree canopy, the bag of candy, the bird, the wooden hut? Were they all just coincidences? Or did Juliane's heartfelt prayer truly reach the heavens? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comment section below this video. And with that, our story comes to a close. If you found this video meaningful, don't forget to share it with a friend. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time. If you found this video interesting, don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you won't miss the next exciting adventures.